August 22nd, 1943, School of Tank Technology, Chobham, England. Dr. Robert Stevenson studied a broken gear taken from the transmission of a captured Tiger tank. The gear was huge, 8 inches wide, 2 inches thick, and made from strong, hardened steel. Its job was to carry 700 horsepower, from the Maybach engine to the tank's driving wheels. Of its teeth had snapped clean off, not cracked or worn, but completely broken in half. It was a sharp break through hard metal. That was supposed to be almost impossible to damage. This was not the first Tiger transmission Stevenson had inspected. It was the 7th one. Every Tiger tank that reached Chobham came in with damage to its transmission. Some had small problems, others were completely destroyed. This one was one of the worst. The entire final drive system was ruined, with bits of metal scattered through the gearbox. The failure was so violent that it locked the driving wheels in place. The tank could no longer move. It turned into a fixed bunker, and the crew had to abandon it. British soldiers later captured the tank in perfect condition near Tunis in May 1943. Reports from Army intelligence said these breakdowns were common, very common. More Tiger tanks stopped working because of mechanical problems than because of enemy weapons. The numbers were shocking. By August 1943, about 1,300 Tigers had been built, but fewer than 700 were in working condition. The rest were stuck waiting for repairs or spare parts, or simply left behind because they could not be fixed. The Tiger tank was meant to be Germany's answer to Soviet heavy tanks. It was designed to be unbeatable and unstoppable. It carried the famous 88mm gun, had armor 100mm thick at the front, and was powered by a 700 horsepower engine. On paper, it could destroy any Allied tank from over 2 kilometers away. It was supposed to be the best tank in the world. But in real life, the Tiger often could not even reach the battlefield. Half of all Tigers broke down before they could finish their first real mission. Most of these problems came from the transmission. Stevenson was a metallurgist, a scientist who studied metals. Before the war, he worked at Vickers Armstrong, testing the strength of steel used to build ships. When the war began, the government hired him to study enemy weapons and armor. He had been studying captured German tanks since 1941. He had seen Panzer IIIs and Panzer IVs, some destroyed and some captured in good shape. Those tanks were usually well designed and dependable. Their transmissions worked fine, but not the Tiger. Its transmission was a disaster. German engineers had designed a tank that their transmission makers could not properly support. The result was a weapon that broke down before it could even face the enemy. Stevenson's job was to find out why. He began by looking closely at the damaged gear. Under a magnifying lens, he could see that the brake was brittle. There were no signs that the metal had bent or stretched before breaking. It had just snapped cleanly without warning. That meant the steel had failed suddenly under pressure. 1 second it was working, the next it had shattered completely. Stevenson measured the gear's hardness with a Rockwell tester. He pressed a small diamond point into the surface and checked how deep it went. The hardness level was 62 HRC on the Rockwell C scale. That was very hard, too hard for a transmission gear. Normally, gears should be between 58 and 60 HRC. That range keeps them hard enough to resist wear, but still soft enough to avoid cracking. This gear was harder than it should have been. He tested several spots on the gear. Each time the surface measured between 62 and 64 HRC. Then he cut the gear in half and tested the inside. The middle part measured 52 HRC, which was much softer. This difference showed that the gear had been case-hardened. That means the outer layer was made very hard through heat treatment, while the core stayed softer and tougher. That process was normal for gears. It gave them a hard surface to resist wear and a softer inside to absorb shocks. But for this to work, the heating process had to be carefully controlled. If the outer layer became too hard or too thick, the gear could become brittle and break.
That's exactly what had happened here.
The hardened layer on this Tiger gear was too deep, about 4 millimeters. Normally, it should have been only 2 to 3 millimeters. The surface was also harder than it should have been. Together, these made the gear fragile and easy to break under heavy load. Stevenson wanted to see the structure of the metal itself. He cut out small samples from the gear and polished them until they were smooth and shiny. Then he used nitric acid to reveal the pattern of the metal's grain and examined it under a microscope at 500 times magnification. The structure showed mostly martensite, which is a very hard and brittle form of steel created when it is cooled too quickly. A small amount of martensite is good, it gives strength, but too much makes the metal easy to break. This gear had almost only martensite and very little of the tempered kind, which means it had not been properly reheated afterward. It also had almost no retained austenite, another phase that helps make steel less brittle. This meant the steel was hardened too much and not softened enough. Tempering was supposed to fix that. After hardening, steel must be reheated to a medium temperature to remove brittleness. This process turns some of the martensite into tempered martensite, which is still hard but more flexible. That balance allows gears to survive shocks without cracking. But this gear had not been tempered correctly. Its martensite was untempered, making it fragile and ready to break under pressure. Stevenson inspected 6 other broken Tiger gears. Each one showed the same pattern: too hard on the surface, hardened too deeply, and no proper tempering. Every single one had snapped in the same way. This showed that the problem was not just one gear or one factory. It was happening in all Tiger transmissions. All the gears were too hard and too brittle. They could not survive normal use, let alone the heavy stress of combat. Sharp turns, quick starts, and sudden stops all created powerful shock loads on the gears. Good gears could handle that. Tiger gears could not. They shattered. Stevenson wrote his first report on August 28, 1943. It described his findings in detail, the extreme hardness, the lack of tempering, and how this affected performance. His conclusion was clear and serious. If you're still watching this, you're part of a special audience. You're not here for simple history stories. You want real engineering facts, the science behind what made weapons work or fail. Subscribe now. Click the button below. Each week, we release videos that show how technical design choices decided who won and who lost in war. Don't just watch. Join the community of people who care about real analysis and truth. Subscribe now. The report continued. It said that the transmission gears from captured Tiger tanks had major flaws in how they were made. The outer hardness was 10 to 15% higher than allowed. The hardened layer was 30 to 50% deeper than normal. The structure of the metal showed that it had not been properly tempered after being hardened. Because of this, the gears would break suddenly during heavy use with no warning. When one gear broke, the whole transmission would stop working, leaving the tank stuck in place. The report suggested sharing this information with Allied tank commanders. It explained that Tiger tanks were weak because of these mechanical problems. If Allied tanks forced Tigers to move fast, turn sharply, or stop and start suddenly, it might cause their transmissions to fail, even without firing at them. The report reached Major General Percy Hobart, who led the British 79th Armoured Division. He was known for his creative ideas. He understood that winning against enemy tanks was not only about stronger guns or armour, but also about finding weaknesses. If Tiger transmissions failed when stressed, then Allied forces could use tactics to make that happen. Hobart shared Stevenson's report with other tank commanders, marking it secret and giving it limited circulation. It included tactical advice. When fighting Tigers, make them move quickly and unpredictably. Try to attack from the sides, force them to turn or reverse direction fast. Each sharp turn would stress the gears and increase the chance of failure. A Tiger that broke down was as good as destroyed, and it didn't cost any ammunition. By September 1943, these ideas reached tank commanders in the field. Some officers didn't believe it. The idea that you could beat a tank just by making it move seemed ridiculous.
Tanks were made to move.
Their transmissions were supposed to handle that. Still, they decided to test it. During battles in Italy in October 1943, British tank crews started noticing strange things. Some Tigers that moved too aggressively suddenly stopped. They weren't hit or burning, they just stopped moving. Their crews abandoned them. Later checks showed their transmissions had failed. The same thing happened again in Sicily, Italy, and Normandy. Tigers kept breaking down in the middle of fights, far more often than normal tanks did. German reports after battles also noted the same issue. They mentioned that transmissions failed under heavy combat, blaming it on stress, poor maintenance, or lack of spare parts. They didn't realize the real reason was bad heat treatment of the gears, faulty metallurgy that made the transmissions ticking time bombs, waiting to break. Stevenson kept studying more captured Tigers through 1944. He tested transmissions from tanks built in different months and factories. The same problem appeared every time. Too hard, not enough tempering, brittle brakes. It was not a problem from one place, it was happening everywhere. The big question was why. Germany had very skilled metal experts and good equipment for heat treatment. They knew how to do it right. So why were the gears wrong? Stevenson dug into the German process. He read captured documents and spoke with German engineers who had been taken prisoner. The reasons slowly became clear. Germany was rushing to build more Tigers for the war on the Eastern Front. They had to produce them as fast as possible. Heat treatment took too much time. Each step, heating the gears, adding carbon, cooling them and tempering them, took hours and needed skilled workers. But Germany was running out of both time and skilled labor. Many experts had been sent to fight in the army, replaced by untrained workers or prisoners. These new workers didn't really understand metallurgy or why tempering mattered. They followed simple instructions: heat, cool, and ship. The tempering step was skipped to save time. That allowed more Tigers to be built faster, but made their gears weaker. The failures didn't show up in the factory. They happened later in the field, when the tanks were already in battle. The factories met their quotas, delivered the tanks on time, and didn't have to deal with the breakdowns. That made the production numbers look good, but the quality was terrible. This same problem appeared across many German factories late in the war. They cut corners to make more weapons quickly. Everything looked fine on the surface, but under stress, the machines fell apart. The Tiger's transmission was just one of many examples. Stevenson wrote that this wasn't just a small issue, it was a symptom of Germany's entire war industry falling apart. Quality control was collapsing. The new weapons being built were already unreliable and only got worse over time. By 1944, Germany's military equipment was failing everywhere. Tanks, planes, submarines, trucks and artillery. Things that once worked perfectly were breaking down all the time. It wasn't lack of courage or skill, it was bad equipment.
Engines seized, steel cracked, transmissions failed.
Germany couldn't keep fighting because its machines simply stopped working after the war. Teams from the Allied nations visited German factories to study how their weapons had been made. They carefully recorded each step of production, talked to the workers, and collected documents. From this research, the full story of the Tiger transmission finally came out. The gears for the Tiger were made by several different companies. The biggest was Zahnradfabrik Friedrichshafen, often called ZF. Maybach and a few smaller workshops also helped. Each plant used slightly different methods, but all had the same problem. They were under extreme pressure to build more, faster. The rule was simple: finish more tanks no matter what. Quality came second. Workers described long 12-hour shifts with almost no breaks. They said supervisors constantly shouted about meeting quotas. The furnaces that heated the gears ran day and night without stopping. Hot gears were pulled out, dunked in oil to harden them, and then new ones were pushed in right away. There was no time to check the temperature properly or to let them cool slowly. A process that should have taken 16 hours was squeezed into only 8. The result was the same problem Stevenson had seen. The gears came out very hard, but wrong. One Czech worker named Josef Novak later told investigators what it was like. He said, "We could tell the gears were not right. The color looked off after quenching, but we said nothing. We were not Germans. Why should we care if German tanks broke down? If our bad work made the war end sooner, that was good." His words showed that the problem was not only poor training. Some workers quietly sabotaged the tanks on purpose. They let the quality slip, ignored broken equipment, or skipped steps when no one was watching. Each small act seemed minor, but together they caused huge reliability issues. German supervisors did notice that transmissions were failing. Reports from the front described Tiger tanks stuck on battlefields because their gears had shattered. But the factories could not slow down to fix the problem. Commanders demanded more tanks every month. The orders from above never changed. Meet the numbers. Official documents from Germany's weapons office, the Heereswaffenamt, even mentioned poor quality control and missing skilled workers. They recommended better procedures. Those papers were filed away and never acted on. The production system simply couldn't change. It kept building Tigers that looked powerful, but were doomed to fail. By early 1945, the situation had become embarrassing. German tank crews themselves started asking for different vehicles. They preferred Panthers or Panzer Vs, which were easier to repair. Tigers broke too often, used up too many spare parts, and spent more time in workshops than in combat. The mighty Tiger, once seen as unstoppable, had turned into a burden, a machine feared by enemies but hated by its own crews. Stevenson kept studying captured tigers right up until the war ended. He examined tanks found in France, Belgium, and finally in Germany itself. Everyone showed the same story: too much hardness, too little tempering, and metal that snapped like glass.
Nothing ever changed.
The system that caused the flaw could not fix it. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, Tiger production stopped for good. The broken transmissions became an example for future engineers, a warning of what happens when speed and pride matter more than proper manufacturing. Stevenson's discoveries shaped British tank design after the war. In the late 1940s and 1950s, when Britain built new tanks, the #1 priority became transmission strength. Engineers wrote precise rules for heat treatment, required tempering, and checked every step carefully. They made sure every gear was tested for both surface and core hardness. Nothing was left to guesswork. These lessons produced tanks whose transmissions worked reliably in combat. They could handle shock loads without cracking. That improvement traced directly back to what Stevenson had learned from the Tigers. He retired from government service in 1955 and began teaching metallurgy at Imperial College London. His students knew he had helped the war effort, but didn't know the details. He never spoke about the Tiger project. The work had been classified, and perhaps the memories were heavy. He had saved Allied lives by exposing a weakness, yet that weakness existed because German workers had been overworked and mistreated. The truth was complicated. Stevenson always said his job was simply to study the metal and write the facts. What others did with those facts was beyond his control. In 1976, a young graduate student named Thomas Richardson was writing a thesis on tank reliability. He asked to interview Stevenson. At 72, Stevenson had retired but still gave an occasional lecture. He agreed to meet. Richardson visited him one spring afternoon. Stevenson's office was filled with books and old photos showing steel microstructures. They sat surrounded by decades of research. Richardson asked about the Tiger transmissions. Stevenson explained what he had found: the too hard surface, the missing tempering, the sudden fractures, and the realization that Germany had built tanks that couldn't survive their own power. Then Richardson asked, "Did you feel proud knowing your work helped defeat the Tigers?" Stevenson paused.
He said, "Proud? No. The Tigers defeated themselves through poor manufacturing. I just recorded it."
A German expert probably noticed the same thing but was ignored. The problem wasn't lack of knowledge. It was the system's inability to slow down and fix mistakes. They could not temper the gears properly, so the problem stayed. "I just documented that failure." He leaned back and added, "It wasn't about satisfaction. It was about understanding how a great industrial system broke itself." Richardson finished his thesis 2 years later. In 1978, he called it Reliability as a Weapon: Mechanical Failures in German Armor. 1943-1945, he devoted an entire 28-page chapter to the Tiger's transmission. It included test data, heat treatment records, and statistics from captured tanks. Few outside academics read it, but tank designers and metallurgists did. Its lessons quietly shaped the next generation of armored vehicles. Modern tank transmissions follow exact rules. The hardness of the surface and core are specified to the decimal. The depth of the hardened layer is fixed. Tempering is mandatory and checked, and quality control includes cutting apart sample gears to inspect their structure. If a single batch fails to meet standards, the whole batch is scrapped. This careful attention exists because of what was learned from failures like those of the Tiger. Stevenson's work became part of the world's engineering memory. German veterans later wrote their own stories, giving the other side of what happened. They described the frustration of fighting in a machine that often broke down before reaching battle. One commander, Hans Otto Carius, who led Tigers on the Eastern Front, wrote that his unit's readiness was never higher than 60%. At least 4 of his 10 Tigers were always in repair, usually for transmission problems. At the time, he blamed rough terrain and limited maintenance crews. Decades later, after reading Stevenson's analysis, he realized the truth. The tanks had been doomed from the start. The steel was heat-treated wrong, the gears brittle. There was nothing the crews could have done to stop the breakdowns. Every mission had been a gamble. Would the gears hold long enough? Carius said learning this was painful. He and his men had trusted their lives to machines that were faulty before they even left the factory. They weren't betrayed by enemies, but by their own industry's shortcuts. They had been told the Tiger was unbeatable, but they found out it was fragile. That knowledge shattered their confidence and left them questioning everything they'd been promised about German engineering. Later tests confirmed that Stevenson had been right all along. Museums preserving Tiger tanks allowed modern scientists to cut open old gears and study them under microscopes. The metal showed the same story. Too hard, too deep a hardened layer, not enough tempering. The exact same flaws from 1943 were still there. At the Tank Museum in Bovington, England, one Tiger, number 131, is the only one still able to run. The engineers who maintain it treat it carefully. They use modern oil, check the transmission often, and never push it too hard. Even with that care, it still needs constant attention. They know its gears were made wrong from the start.
It only works today because they drive it gently.
In real combat, it would fail fast. That fact proves everything Stevenson discovered more than 80 years ago. The Tiger's powertrain was not strong enough for war. It could not handle battlefield stress and often failed without being hit. Its greatest weakness was hidden inside the gearbox. Allied commanders who learned this from Stevenson's reports used the knowledge well. They changed tactics to make Tigers move sharply, forcing them to turn and accelerate often. Every maneuver increased strain on the transmission. Some Tigers ended up stuck and abandoned without a single shot fired. They were defeated by physics, not by gunfire. This understanding gave Allied crews new confidence. They realized the feared Tiger was not unstoppable. Behind its thick armor was a machine with a fragile heart. Knowing that helped them fight with less fear and more daring. Stevenson died in 1989 at the age of 85. His obituary in the Times mentioned his teaching career and his contributions to metallurgy. Only one short line referred to his wartime service. It said he had helped analyze military equipment, but gave no details. There was no mention of the Tiger, no mention of transmissions or gears, no hint that he had uncovered one of the most important mechanical flaws of the war. His wartime papers were donated to the Imperial War Museum, where they still rest today. Researchers can read them, though few ever do. Among historians, the Tiger is remembered for its firepower and thick armor. Few realize how often it broke down, or that its downfall was caused by steel treated the wrong way. Stevenson's findings changed tactics, affected battles, and shaped later engineering. Yet his name is almost forgotten. Still, his work lives on wherever engineers measure hardness properly, temper steel correctly, and test every gear before it goes into service. Today, museum engineers and historians completely agree with Stevenson's wartime reports. Tests on preserved Tiger tanks show that his conclusions were entirely correct. The gears inside their transmissions are far too hard, with deep case layers and very little tempering. Their microstructures look brittle under the microscope. The issue was not a small mistake. It was built into every single Tiger tank and never fixed. The Tank Museum at Bovington, England, owns the only Tiger in the world that still runs, Tiger 131. This tank was captured by British forces in 1943 and later restored to working condition. Museum engineers take great care of it. They use modern oils, replace worn parts, and inspect the transmission regularly. They also limit how often it runs and never drive it roughly. Even with all this care, the transmission still needs constant maintenance. They know that the original gears were made wrong from the very beginning. If this Tiger were used in real battle conditions, with heavy loads, sharp turns, and sudden acceleration, it would quickly break again. That single fact proves everything Stevenson discovered in 1943. The Tiger's transmission was not built to survive real combat. Its gears could not handle the extreme stress of war and often broke without warning. The tank that was feared for its power was secretly crippled by weak engineering deep inside its machinery. This weakness gave Allied tank commanders a quiet advantage. Thanks to Stevenson's report, they understood that forcing a Tiger to move suddenly, to turn, back up, or charge forward, could be just as deadly as hitting it with a shell. Every sharp movement increased strain on the transmission. Some Tigers were defeated not by gunfire but by their own shattered gears. Their crews were forced to abandon them in the field. That knowledge also changed how Allied soldiers felt. Before, the Tiger had seemed like an unbeatable monster. But once they knew its transmissions were fragile, they became braver. They attacked with more confidence, knowing that the Tiger's power came with a hidden flaw. The tank that once inspired fear now carried a built-in weakness that could be exploited. Stevenson's analysis made this possible. His quiet work in a small lab helped shape entire battlefield tactics. His reports gave commanders new ways to fight smart instead of just fighting harder. He passed away in 1989 at the age of 85. His obituary in the Times mentioned his teaching at Imperial College and his contributions to the study of metals, but it only briefly noted his wartime service. It said he had analyzed military equipment but gave no further details. There was no mention of Tiger tanks, transmissions, or how he helped uncover one of Germany's greatest wartime weaknesses. His personal reports, notebooks and papers were given to the Imperial War Museum in London. They are stored safely in the archives, available for researchers who know to ask for them.
Few people ever do.
Among the general public, the story of the Tiger tank still focuses on its strength, its powerful gun, thick armor, and terrifying presence on the battlefield. Very few know the truth, that its most dangerous enemy was not another tank, but its own transmission. Stevenson's findings changed the course of engineering and military design. Even if his name is not widely remembered, he proved that understanding materials, how they bend, break, or harden, can decide whether machines succeed or fail. His work became a lesson that lives on in every modern tank factory. The story continues in every tank built since the war. Modern engineers still use his discoveries to avoid repeating Germany's mistakes. When they design transmissions, they pay close attention to heat treatment, hardness, and tempering. They test every part to make sure it won't fail under shock. They measure both surface and core hardness to confirm the right balance between strength and flexibility. If a gear is too hard, it is rejected. If the tempering is incomplete, the entire batch is scrapped. Every gear must meet exact standards before being used. All of this exists because engineers learned from the Tigers that failed. Stevenson's work became part of that permanent knowledge. His lessons prevent disasters in modern combat vehicles and keep soldiers safe today. The German side of the story also became clearer after the war. Former engineers and soldiers wrote books and reports describing their experiences. They talked about the endless frustration of trying to fight in tanks that broke down again and again. They explained how factory quotas and rushed production schedules forced them to cut corners. One German commander said his Tigers often broke before even reaching the front lines. Others recalled spending more time fixing transmissions than fighting battles. In the end, many German crews realized their own industry had failed them. They were promised superior engineering, but they received unreliable machines. They were told the Tiger was invincible, but it couldn't even drive long distances without breaking down. The result was deep disappointment and mistrust. They felt betrayed, not by their soldiers or leaders in the field, but by the factories that valued speed over safety and quantity over quality. That betrayal had a lasting emotional effect. It made some German soldiers doubt the myth of perfect German engineering. They began to see that pride and haste could destroy even the most advanced machines. Years later, when metallurgists examined the preserved Tigers, they confirmed everything Stevenson had written. The metal samples told the same story: too hard on the outside, not tempered enough inside, brittle and ready to crack. Nothing had ever been corrected during production. The same errors appeared in every batch, every factory, every month of the war. The Tiger tank, once the pride of German engineering, had been defeated by its own creators' shortcuts. It was not the bravery of Allied soldiers alone that won. It was also the attention to detail of scientists like Stevenson, who understood how materials behave under pressure. Wars, he showed, are won not only by courage and firepower, but by precision and patience. When engineers and historians visit the Bovington Museum today, they often reflect on this. They see Tiger 131 sitting quietly in the hangar, looking powerful even after all these years. But those who understand the science behind it know the truth. Inside that tank is a transmission made with the same fatal flaws that destroyed so many others. It runs now only because it is treated gently. If it were ever driven the way it was meant to in battle, it would fail again. This reality makes Stevenson's discovery timeless. He showed that when a nation forgets to respect the science behind its machines, it risks losing them altogether. His quiet work in a small English lab helped end the legend of an invincible tank. He didn't do it with bullets or bombs, but with careful testing, measurement, and understanding of steel. His legacy continues in every engineer who checks a metal sample twice before approving it, in every factory that tests its gears under stress, and in every transmission that holds firm under battle conditions. Every time a tank's gears survive a hard turn instead of breaking apart, Stevenson's lessons are alive. He never sought fame or recognition. He didn't brag about finding Germany's greatest mechanical weakness. He just did his job, examining metal, writing reports, and telling the truth about what he saw. That is what made his contribution so powerful. He proved that quiet, careful work can change the outcome of wars. Every modern tank that moves smoothly across rough terrain owes something to his research. Every reliable gear that resists breaking under shock owes its strength to the understanding he helped build. His story shows that progress often comes not from grand inventions, but from solving small, hidden problems that others ignore. The Tiger's failures are more than history. They are reminders. Reminders that even the strongest machines can fall if they are built without care. Reminders that good engineering means more than power. It means balance, testing, and respect for the materials themselves. Stevenson's work proves that knowledge, not pride, is the true strength behind technology. His reports may rest quietly in archives, but their lessons continue to move every modern army vehicle that rolls across the earth today. The gears of history still turn on the wisdom he left behind. So, as this story ends, remember, the Tiger tank did not lose because it lacked courage or firepower. It lost because its steel was too hard, its gears too brittle, its tempering skipped to save time. And one man, working with patience and precision, discovered why.